Not to put Chris on the spot, but what would you like to hear as a client?
Well, I mean, I think, the more detailed work you get in, I think, if you're on the law firm side, the risk becomes too, we'll say, well, we'll do that piece in-house, or we'll take that piece out. So, the more detailed you get, the more we're going to look for what exactly we need from you, and not anything else. I think in terms of communicating, I communicate all the time. I have every quarter I need to know what all of my bills are. I need to know everything to report into finance, because if it doesn't get picked up, which it didn't one year, it hits me when I'm not expecting it, and that's devastating because it shuts down other things you're working on. But I think the more detailed you get, again, and you set the expectations, that's a good thing, because the flip side is, if you don't want to get in a representation, this happened to me once where I was reviewing the bill and it said, junior associate wrote memo to senior associate, who then wrote another memo to the partner. And I'm like, I never said you could write a memo. I mean, you got to ask me if you're going to do that. Now, it may be impeding on the way they're practicing, but I can't pay for a memo in my budget.
So understanding the scope in some detail, and then perhaps also understanding what the fees might be for contingencies and additionals.
As a correspondence to what you just said, Chris, I found with a couple of the firms that the more detail they give, they're a little concerned about, if I give all this detail, will the client chop it up and only take a piece of it. But I've actually seen some the reverse of that when you demonstrate your competency of what you're going to deliver, the client can make a weighted guess of, well, it's going to cost me internally to do the work anyway, and it looks like it's about the same. And by the way, you seem to really understand what you're going to do. So you've been giving me some confidence that I'd like to take some things I thought I was going to do, but we don't have that same understanding of, and ask you if you could do that. So I think it kind of flip around.
It probably becomes more of a function of timing in that case, really. So if if it's an M&A transaction and you're planning to do all the due diligence in-house, but the time is so compressed, you can't throw enough internal resources on it. Then you might outsource something you normally would take in internally. So.
Let's. There was a comment. Go ahead.
Yeah, this is a question for the whole panel. It is clear to me that the industry, the clients, are asking for two things: value and predictability on the bills and the cost. And I think the legal industry, we all are reacting by trying to figure it out how to be more efficient. And while in other industries, I think this have happened over time, I think we all are rushing to get there. And what I'm seeing is some people is trying business process management, Six Sigma. Other people is going on the legal project management side. Other people is going with task coding. Other people is doing budgeting. Other people is doing alternative staffing. Other people is doing... There are a million things that we are trying as an industry, and I think we are struggling with that because everyone is going in a different direction. So from your experience from multiple industries, what do you think works best, and what do you predict we are going to all end up?
I think you need to have a mix of it. And I think each firm is going to approach it differently based on the culture of how their people will react to it. So I think even in working together with Squire Sanders throughout the year, we saw some people reacted better to what would it be like to apply project management techniques versus some people reacted to, well, how can we package up a process? So I think it's a good thing that the industry is going in a lot of different directions, because that's going to provide a lot of case studies and examples of what's working and what's not. And I think the challenge you have within your firm is prioritizing which ones deserve the time and effort for your particular culture of the firm. All of those are good best practices. It's about really getting them adopted to the culture and then the belief in the execution within your organization. So if it's all one thing, great. If it's a little taste of everything, but you put a different brand on it than Six Sigma, whatever is going to capture people's imagination and get them to learn it and work together well is, I think, what will matter most for you.
But it does put some stress on profitability models, financial systems. All that has to be geared up to deal with that complexity and serve up information that makes sense and that can be used for decision support. So but it seems to be, depending on what you're doing, the size and who your clientele is, certainly a mixture of those. Henry.
From an IT perspective, one of the things that I struggle with is that now for mid-sized firms like Burns & Levinson and firms like Goodwin Procter and Choate Hall, we're driven by our accounting systems, which are hourly-based, fee-based systems. So consequently, everything's measured in hours, and that's how the whole system is driven. So it's very hard to get buy-in for something that's different because the accounting system, it's all about putting time in and accounting for time. And that's really, there's no alternative fee arrangements create havoc with free credits, profitability, all the reporting that happens because it's not something that's measured by time, which so many firms are just directed to.
So going back to what Andrea said, sort of picking and choosing your path through this, taking, if not baby steps, at least small steps, and finding out, your roadmap for implementing that requires some thought.
Well, I think the technology companies are also aware of this. I mean, I don't know how many of you have been to ABA Tech Show. I know Jeff was one of the founders. It's incredibly interesting because the exhibit hall floor has every kind of software program, hardware, everything you could possibly imagine. And then upstairs they're having seminars on the death of the billable hour. And everything downstairs is about how do we catch the billable hour and not lose our time. I don't think you're ever going to have uniformity in the practice of law. I don't think you're going to find it. But I think that what you are really asking is, what are the resources to help me figure out what is best for my firm? And I think the answer to that is, one, going to something like a tech show where you can go and play with all the new software and talk to all the reps and see what's out there. And the other is to look at consultants, of which I assume you are one of the consultants. I know some other consultants. I know also the ABA has, I'm in the solo small firm group. We have an online listserv where there's something like 6,000 attorneys, and every time you say to someone, what time and billing program should I use, you'll get 100 people who love the one that's recommended and 100 people who hate it and thinks it's the worst thing on the planet. So that's why I don't think you're going to have uniformity. I think it's very individual. But I think you need to know, where do I go find what I'm looking for? And depending on how resourceful you are, you can either do the research yourself or you can hire someone to help you as a consultant.
I think it's very difficult because we can't say, hey, we have a fixed fee practice and therefore however many hours people in our practice bill doesn't matter. So we kind of have, in some ways, the worst of both worlds, right? You're still having to keep track of all of your hours and you're doing all of this fixed fee work, so you don't necessarily get the advantages of having the fixed fee work. I just think that that's an implementation problem that's going to be really difficult for a lot of law firms. But I will say, just on the technology side, I think from the experience we've had in the past year, one of the interesting things about technology is how many other people are trying to do sort of technology-driven solutions to things, and that so if I'm working on a deal, there might be 4 different people in a deal, like with a deal room, for instance, that is available. And so you have to decide who's you're going to use and who's the most efficient and how you're going to do that. And so I think that the technology solutions sometimes, at least right now, there are so many of them and they're so inconsistent, it doesn't necessarily save time. Just to throw that out there.
I think two thoughts is, I like to speak in analogies. Don't let the tail wag the dog. I think it's a little unfair to a lot of the technologists when we turn to them and expect the solution to just be out of the box. Technology automates what we do. If we don't know what we do, how do we automate it? So one, just turning first to the technology to be what's going to provide the solution is a little bit of that tail wagging the dog. You got to think about the people and the process, and then, okay, how do we automate it? The first, we're all familiar with Henry Ford and the assembly line, right? Well, the first car wasn't made by thinking of the assembly line and automating it. It was made manually, and then Henry said, how do we make that more efficient? The other part of the tail wagging the dog is, I think, sometimes fixating too much on what the fee arrangement is. Because alternative fees have been around for a while, and contingencies and litigation. And if you go engage a client based on how they're going to pay for it, you're not really engaging them on the value of what they need to get out of it or the subject matter of what you're going to have to do to deliver it. Think about those things first and get those understood, and then say, well, what is the right fee arrangement? Because the right fee arrangement could be alternative, contingency, or time and expense. But if you don't understand what it is that you're going to deliver, how can you really set up a payment scheme for it? So going in to say, well, we're trying to sell this deal based on a payment scheme kind of misses the point of what you're really trying to do for the client, too.
And I just wanted to comment on one thing Holly said. When you talk about assessing your associates by the amount of time they're spending, I assure you that if an associate is bringing in $5 million worth of business a year, nobody cares how many billable hours they bill in a given year. So, you know, law firm assessments, I mean, I think there's an attempt to make it as scientific as possible, but there's all kinds of other factors that need to be considered as well, and somehow firms are doing that right now. That's not a new idea. You know, if I'm the associate who has gotten my firm on Twitter and Facebook, and all of a sudden I find out that I'm getting 60% of my clients from the internet, that has value also. So, you know, there are ways in which it is currently being done.
So that's an interesting point, and let me sort of segue, and I think get to the same point, perhaps with slightly different words, and that is, what are the metrics that we're looking for? How do we know if AFAs work? And sort of a related question is, how long has it taken us to realize any benefits if for those of us who've implemented it? So what are you looking for? How do you know as you go, or what metrics would you look for in an AFA to say, okay, I'm comfortable with this. This is the way I want to do business?
Well, I think, you know, for us, you know, we always have an idea what something costs from history, right? Mm-hmm. And so, you know, to me, I think as I look at this and I'm listening to this conversation, part of it is, at the end of the day, I still want value. Like, this is not a commodity to me. I don't want to go out and, you know, at the end of the day, I want to hire the best. And I think the other part is, you know, I want to win. Whatever it is, I want to win. If it's a negotiation, I want to win. If it's a litigation, I want to win. Whatever the dispute is, I want to win. So I'm looking for people to help me win. So I'm not going to necessarily, you know, if someone had a slightly better proposal, you know, I'll go with them because it's slightly cheaper, but I'm not confident we're going to win. I'm still going to go to the counsel that's going to take me to the finish line.
I think that, you know, to take an analogy out of the I want to win, use some sports. You often watch all-star games, and it's great that all the best stars are on the same team, but do they perform as good as the teams that maybe have a couple stars and then have role players? So to bring that around to especially litigation, alternative fee arrangements doesn't just have to strictly mean fixed price. What it might mean is fielding the best team player for the role. And so maybe, especially in the litigation area, I see back to the question of what tools or techniques work. In litigation, project management principles in practice. And instead of maybe an associate that typically bills $400 an hour, there needs to be a trained legal project manager who bills $200 an hour.